Welcome to the Innovation Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Innovaccer, the health cloud company. We're on a mission to connect and curate the world's healthcare information to make it accessible and useful. With Innovaccer, everyone works in the service of patients like never before as one. Visit us online at innovaccer.com.
Hey, welcome today to joining us at the Innovation Accelerator podcast at Innovaccer. And I'm Sean Hogan, General Manager for Innovaccer. Today's topic is digital transformation. And we're going to put a pointed lens on the topic. Specifically, we're interested in a dialogue around how digital transformation is really translating into better care quality and experience, and how we're taking that to an individual level, the person, and then also, of course, the context of the business of healthcare. We're joined today by special guest Phil Fasano. Phil is CEO of Bay Advisors. He's an expert in digital technology and innovation. Phil and I have known each other since his days in tenure at Kaiser Permanente. And while Phil was the CIO there working with George Halverson, he ushered KP and really the health system for our entire country into the digital era. They always looked at it as much bigger than deploying EHR. It was really about transforming what the experience and what healthcare is in this country and in one of the best run systems in this country. So, Phil, great to be with you again today. Maybe share with the group a little bit more about what you've been up to at your current role and your worldview and the industry.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that very kind introduction. I can say that most of my time is consumed with the boards that I serve on and the companies that I advise these days. Many of them are in healthcare, but not all of them. I also work with companies in the technology security sector, as well as the broader technology sector as well. But most of my interests and my focus remain in the healthcare sector. And I'm involved, obviously, with you all, but I'm involved with some health systems as well, either on their board or as an advisor. I also have been the CEO of a couple of tech startups, one that is now focused on healthcare and has done quite well through COVID. The other, which was basically a human capital organization, we sold last summer. So since selling that company, my entire focus has been with the boards and the companies I engage.
Yeah, I know. One of the things that we especially value is that bridge between the realities of how technology actually has to work and function in the context of an organization, as well as deliver on a transformative vision. So, Phil, awesome to be together again with you today. And then, of course, my colleague who's also with us, Gary Druckenmiller. Gary recently joined the Innovaccer team, and we love having him on board. He's dedicated his career to healthcare and specifically on how health systems are driving their mission and excellence in care quality and delivery for their communities, but also in the way that they engage the individuals with whom they interact in a consumer experience. And that's been an amazing journey for the industry, but for Gary in particular, he brings a lot of passion to his role at Innovaccer. And maybe you could share a little bit more, Gary, on what you're up to and why you joined us.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the last part. That's an easy one. Innovaccer is doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. I think that's a good place to start. Kind of trying to breach the hardest problems and starting there, which is inherently the kind of mastering of health system data has been the arduous task, so to speak. And Innovaccer's all over that. That's why I'm here, because blending that then blends nicely to my kind of timeline coming into Innovaccer, where the first half of my career was actually spent outside of healthcare. I worked in a lot of manufacturing sectors, automotive, retail, hospitality, and got to see firsthand what consumerism really looks like, how we interact with it every single day. Well, what better of a merge than that with Innovaccer? Those are the two intersections of the value chain that have been desperately trying to come together for well over 2 decades now, and I just couldn't be more thrilled to be here and chatting with you guys today on this exact topic. Real exciting stuff.
Thank you, Gary. So as I mentioned, we're going to try to put a specific lens on the conversation of digital transformation, and I think we can't do that without the context of the current reality that we're in. We're in the middle of another COVID spike. Health systems are under a lot of duress, and yet many of them are pointing to digital as a means to help them navigate this. So, Phil, I'd love to get your vantage on what digital means, and then specifically why it matters today. Because healthcare is seen as such a in-person, in-facility kind of experience, and yet digital is perhaps counter to that. So, love to get how you think about the topic.
Years ago when I was at Kaiser, one of the simple phrases I used, and a lot of people used it as a way of kind of putting an exclamation point on what we were doing, was delighting our patients and members. And then after a while of working with our physicians and our nursing teams, I also said we needed to delight them too. And digital is both a set of technologies and a unique opportunity for healthcare to effectively make itself connected and easier to interact with, to allow patients and members to have access that, frankly, they would never have had given challenges with geography, distance, and time. And it really creates the ability for the entire industry to find paths to delivering better care at a more affordable price. And doing that on a consistent basis, where everyone in the ecosystem, from the patients to the physicians, win and get a better level of performance and easier set of activities. Digital just happens to be the present way we talk about transformation, but it is the next wave of transformation that healthcare has the opportunity to engage in and really benefit from in a way that fundamentally changes the entire industry for the better, and changes it to ultimately delight everyone who's involved, given how challenging it is to deal with from every position, whether you're a physician, a nurse, or one of the patients that are interacting and having to kind of stitch the disparate pieces of healthcare together for your benefit.
Yeah, and yet the uptake's been hard, right? It's been, in some respects, hard.
It's been disappointing is the word I would use, Sean. I mean, we did so much with this. People always said, geez, it was easier to do at Kaiser because you're integrated. You had all the pieces. And that argument was, I think, fundamentally, a stiff arm. And the industry stiff armed the opportunity 10 years ago. I think it's very hard for the industry to stiff arm it now. I think the benefits are obvious and clear. The opportunities are equally obvious and clear, and the financial benefit that a lot of people are looking for, given the financial challenges and stress that the industry is under with COVID and with delivering care just generally today. So many organizations need to embrace this particular path forward as the path that's going to really be meaningful and transformative for their organizations. And it isn't, and digital isn't one thing. It's quite a number of things that have to come together. It's a number of systems. It's ways of thinking about how you deliver care. It's embracing telehealth at a level that the industry only has during COVID, and needs to as we exit COVID, if we ever do. And ultimately, it's just part of how we deliver healthcare now. We do it in a way that's most effective and convenient at the moment in time, and it has to be most effective and convenient for all parties.
Well, I'm going to pick up on one of the things from what you're involved in now. You mentioned security as a topic that you're often close to. Mm-hmm. And that's a big tension, right? Because on the one hand, doing digital and engaging the way that you just described involves opening things up, sharing data in ways that I would especially think as a CIO can be terrifying for an organization, or potentially highly risky. So how do you speak a little bit maybe about your thoughts on that tension?
Well, I think the data you're really talking about is the patient's data. So I always started from that perspective, although we warehoused a lot of it at Kaiser when I was there, and the health system warehouses it on for the benefit of the patients. But there's a combination of things. One is the information or the data needs to be brought together across disparate you know encounters because they all matter in the current health and treatment of patients. Uh, the security elements of that, and I found actually that it's a constant journey of maintaining and managing insights and information for the benefit of the patients and the those that are treating, and ensuring that that is something we all aspire to be the best we can be at. And it's you can only be the best you can be. There will always be bad actors that want to get at data like this. Unfortunately, the world we live in, they're capable of doing it no matter how much money we spend on security. But the opportunity is there. I think most like-minded healthcare organizations, particularly the larger ones or the medium-sized ones, are doing everything that they can possibly do to keep information secure. And I'm learning every day. I actually had a conversation yesterday with someone who invested in a security startup that is, basically allowing end-to-end encryption of data and encryption while data is being used without performance challenges. So, in every respect, we're starting to see technologies emerge that allow us to feel increasingly confident that the data that's being shared and moved about can be secured and well managed. And we can guarantee to those that are using it that both the integrity of it has been maintained and the
Right.
security of it is maintained.
Mm.
So, and by the way, let me add, do that more affordably than I could 10 years ago, because I do know what I was spending 10 years ago. I think it's a lot more affordable today to really, with at a very high level of quality, managed security.
Mm.
Yeah. And Gary, I'm sure you're chomping to jump in on some of this because and you led with the thinking about the person as a consumer or consumer experience. That's
Mm.
in many respects been a challenging orientation to take in healthcare because in many patient you need to almost direct them what to do. So
Mm.
what does it mean as you've seen it and how organizations are kind of embracing the notion as a person as a consumer and what that's
Mm.
meant?
Yeah, and it's thanks, Sean. And it's funny. Most of the time when I'm kind of talking through this, it sounds more like a protest than it does an actual presentation of some caliber, because it's much what Phil is referring to, which is it's this notion of, because everything, and I like many of the things Phil is alluding to, it brings causality to the notion that many of the things we're going through are inherently stepping stones to consumerism. They're temporary impact points and barriers, provider barriers that have been building over decades that we're now having to break down again and move from a 1.0 version to a 5.0 version in what seems like a nanosecond. Not easy to do. And why is that? Well, COVID accelerated a lot of it, but really it's the fact that in a socioeconomic perspective, most of the world has now gotten used to consumerism. There's really no kind of notion of third party political anything anymore. Everybody's got access, for better or worse, and that is now changing the game into what are typically highly hierarchical structures like providers. So that is also accelerating this notion of consumerism, and the ultimate advent of it is asking ourselves the biggest question, which is, what is the end game? And the end game really isn't the end game, but it's the closest to what we can reconcile as a lot of what Phil is saying, which is you gotta make the intelligence that is buried within all these different factions malleable, so that there are no more factions. You don't call them by their names anymore. There is no CRM. There is no department XYZ. There is no manage this versus manage that. Once everything becomes malleable and interoperable, and that's process, data, content are usually the big three. Those are the building blocks to consumerism. And every industry, with the exception of this one, and maybe a little bit on the payer side and definitely on higher ed, have yet to solve this problem. So the end game is answering that question for an average consumer who sees their provider and are beginning to see their providers in a new light, thanks to the Walgreens of the world, the CVSs of the world. They're used to that. They've been doing this for years, and they're coming at it from the complete opposite end that the traditional provider or surgery center or physician practice group have been doing. And they're now infusing hard health with soft health, with the mechanism of commerce. What Phil is saying too, kind of this my pleasure, service-oriented attitude, and many of those around the world, not just in the U.S. but around the world, are kind of going, "Wow, this is actually, from this side, healthcare looks really easy. I want that." And so now the expectation for the provider is going up exceedingly fast, which is why organizations like Innovaccer are spinning their heads, trying to rein all of this in, working with an ecosystem of developers to figure out how to ultimately map what is now being considered as the consumer journey. And the consumer journey is what will become the common term of the end game. And as we go on in this conversation, I think we'll probably expose a lot of that, because every service line has a journey, and ultimately every person has their own journey. That's an incredibly difficult place to get to, but many are now seeing it. That is the end game for at least the provider space on the consumer side.
Well, I see that. I see the points that he just made are quite interesting, because they intersect with some of the things I said, but then you go beyond that, and you start to say, if this is a consumer lens, most of my health, most of your health is managed by you and me at home. Everything
exactly
from
right.
The foods we eat, the lifestyle we live. So the need for healthcare in the office, where I go see my doctor, 1% of my life, and the rest of my life I lead everywhere else. The need for healthcare to catch up to that as a reality, and to provide the tools and capabilities to help serve that, ultimately lead to a much enriched life, a longer life, healthier life, for each of us. And that's the opportunity in consumerism, I think, that's ahead of us as an industry. And that digital transformation offers the connective tissue to enable the health systems at large to catch up to the whole consumerism wave and really have an impact on people and their health in a prospective way, which I think is going to be really important as we talk about this and others talk about the opportunity for themselves.
Yeah, you just trumped the end game, right? Like, that even takes it on an entirely, it's a cliche, but on an entirely different level, to the extent of what's the degree of malevolence that exists within the industry not to allow that to happen, right? That's an interesting way to look at it, right? Like, what are consumers willing to no longer play a part in health subjugation? That's another interesting question to ask, right? And then what is the enforcement of that on highly hierarchical, dare we say, fairly bureaucratic organizations that kind of run like the government, right? To break those down, to then answer those questions and make that, because that, what you just described, is the ultimate switch, which is, of course, where value-based care wants to head, which is where a population health mindset wants to get to. But I am of the belief that the average person wants to control their own health. Now, and doing that, that's up to them. Whether if you want to have bad health, that's your choice. If you want to have good health, that's your choice. What they don't want to own is the care part, because they don't understand it. But that's what we're trying to make easy to understand, is that as your consumer journey evolves, we have a relative understanding of kind of who you are, what your behavioral states are, what your mental state is as you come to our system. That is a completely unknown exercise today. And then we also know your clinical persona, because perhaps you were here before. But most importantly is we know what people like you look like. And thereby we can talk to you better. We can, and not just 3 to 6 to 9 months after you leave our system. How about 3, 6, 9 years? How about 20 years? So now it begs even a bigger question. Do providers in their digital transformation ways have that responsibility? Is that part of their responsibility? And many of the consumer to security to journey universes, which are trying to clash together, all based upon a revitalized conversation around data, are ultimately going to yield some of those answers to that, I think, and ability. And many of those to then, instead of backing into the technology, reach in and pick out the appropriate transformational movements in order to line those things up. Because that's another exercise I think many health systems are still trying to figure out. It's like, what do I need?
Yeah, as you were just describing that, there was one of the things I think we're all kind of experiencing is how it's playing out in different industries. And I think our experiences in something like retail, digital and retail have really kind of come together as one thing, right? I don't think I separate those into different domains. Financial services is much more orchestrated that way. I don't know when I last went to a bank. My kids don't know what a bank is. Why would you go to one of those?
Great point. Yeah.
Where are we with respect to healthcare and digital? Are they distinct? Is it being solved from within the industry, from outside of the industry? Is it being driven by the consumer who wants it, or by industry who's trying to press it? How is that playing out from the perspectives you have?
Phil, why don't you take this one first? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. No, I'm happy to hit that. I mean, I think it's all of the above, given your question, Sean. I mean, the industry itself, has its goals and desires in terms of wanting to use digital transformation as a lever to advance, both the connectedness of the industry, because obviously everyone treating a patient wants to see all the information about all the patients all the time, which was another expression we used quite a lot when I was at Kaiser, and I think it's something that has to become increasingly true. But we used to use it and reflect on it as all the information that we have about the patient, or that the health system has about the patient. I think we're now starting to open up the can of worms where it's all the information, which means anything you have on your watch, anything you have on a monitor, anything you're using at home, the places you live, the places you frequent, the environment you live in, all the other social determinants, all the factors that are involved in health. And then it's the opportunity, and the big honking opportunity, as I see it, is for the health systems, to be there to provide care when you need it, and to be there to be supportive of better health every day. So being much more connected with the health system on an active basis, where insights are coming from the system to the member or patient, and allowing those insights to be useful in the moment as they live their daily lives. And that was one of the goals we had when I was working on some of the work we were working on at Kaiser around mobile capabilities, digital capabilities that were in consumers' hands. We wanted, one of my goals was they'd be on their app, so to speak, every day, and that app would not only offer them, useful insights about how they can navigate the care side, but ultimately be interacting with tools they use themselves, from the exercise and monitor, their heart rates and so on, to enable greater insight into how healthy they are and how healthy they can be, and then offering them the pathways to serve that. When I also think about the larger opportunity, the opportunity to increase longevity. So in other words, for us all to live longer, and then live healthier as we live longer, is a subject that is extraordinarily interesting, and particularly as I get older, and I think as we all get older. And the reality there is the opportunity to do that is right on the table right now, both within the healthcare industry and around the healthcare industry. There's many companies that are emerging, but there's some that I've grown to know that are specifically tackling that topic and will have an impact on increasing life expectancy and increasing quality of life during that increased life expectancy. The kind of the holy grail. Not to say we're going to be 150 years old, but geez, making it to 90 or 100 and being able to have a high quality life. And for some people, being able to be that old and actually feel much younger and be able to bounce back from exercise and all the other things that come with that are part of the potential of all the things we're kind of talking about. You need the data, you need the insights, you need the health systems, you need the science, you need the third-party organizations with apps and capabilities that are bringing it all together. And you need to bring all of that together for the benefit of frankly, the word is humanity, but you and me.
Right. Yeah,
Maybe if you share your thought, one interesting point in that is there's an implication of trust too in all of that, and I think you alluded to that in your earlier comments that the individual has to trust to open up, and are they ready for that? Are they ready to trust the health system with their data, with their situations in their home, in their lives?
I think more and more people are, particularly generationally. Younger generations are much more open than older generations are. It's just natural affinity for how information has been widely used and available, and insight about the fact that I used to say your phone knows you better than anyone. Most people don't realize that, but it really does. It knows everywhere you go. It knows everything you do. It knows
Cyborg.
so much about you just because you're using it so much, and it's in your pocket and it's at your bedstand. That you've already given up a large part of the words most people use as privacy. The reality is now that you've already done that, why don't you get the benefits from it? And the benefits are truly in this next digital wave.
Yeah. Elon Musk is noted of saying that we're already phase one cyborgs because we're carrying around a device, a device that knows everything about us, right? The only thing hasn't happened yet is it's not like implanted in our head, and who knows? The notion of Sean of what you talk about with trust. I love Phil's comment in relation to generations. Every generation is always like that generation, right? Like we're that generation where we look back. We've got a lot of history and transformational markets across our careers, but man, you got to really recognize in the advent of highly prolific and progressive digital environments, this generation, like my kids, I've got teenagers. And Sean, you got young kids too, like their lives. I mean, it's a complete opposite from how we grew up in a lot of ways. And I use this term often. I say there's more PHI, and it's probably not true, but there's more PHI in Facebook than there is in every health system in America, right? I think we've crossed the path of people being comfortable talking about their health. I mean, people have entire health journeys in blogs that span years, and they go in the most intricate details of their tests, of their treatments, of their doctors and their physicians and their care teams. It's all out there already. And we conflate this notion of PHI and HIPAA and you can continue to use it in a methodology that's not decades, but let's just say probably a couple decades old. Meanwhile, time has passed us by. And social media is for that record, basically giving everybody a voice. And a lot of it is a health voice. I'm got stage 4 cancer. Here is my journey. And a lot of people put up pictures of their documents, of their clinical medical documents, and it's there. So that's my thoughts on that. To come back to your comment along the lines of other markets, for the last 20 years, and I'll pick out a couple. And Andy Burtis, who's our chief marketing officer, is good about reminding me of these things. And I think many of us consider us natural historians to the dawn of the commercial internet era, which is like 1995 roughly till now. And when we look back in time, the biggest, when transformation hits in other industries, it was always due to a Vesuvius moment. So if you look at Zillow, why was Zillow born? The housing crisis, right? Fannie Mae, Sallie Mae going belly up. When you look at blockchain, why did blockchain really come into its own? It's because of the financial crisis. Right. So what's our moment? It's right now. It's COVID. Same thing. And if you look at the parameters of pre-COVID, there was maybe a few hundred startups that were really starting to enter into the health tech space. Now there's over 3,000 post-pandemic. Everybody's jumping in because everybody knows now, due to what we're seeing in the media and what we're seeing in everything else, how these systems operate. And their general recognition is that they don't operate very well. And when you see article after article of this system is running out of beds and there's not enough physicians here and now with the staff departure, I mean, that's just the biggest one yet. People see this and they get worried and they get concerned because health systems and hospitals, especially standalone hospitals, they're tied and bound to their community. And if many of these health systems and hospitals, they go out of business, for many of these towns, those towns go out of business too. They got to find some place to get their health care done until CVS rolls in and Walgreens is on the other corner. So to answer your ultimate question, I think there's so much to learn by turning our head just a slight more degree angle to the right from what other markets just recently in our past history have done in bringing that forward. And the one constant theme that I see is that trying to fix the problem in the middle, trying to fix a provider, is not the solution. Every major transformational market has shown you can't do that. Like, you can't fix the publishing industry. You're not going to be able to fix higher ed. What you can do is you can go to the opposite ends of the value chain and address both of those. And I look at Innovaccer. Innovaccer has created this insane provider-specific data lake data model, going after the data problem, huge. On the other side of it, it's consumerism. What types of mechanisms and tools are we putting in their hands in order to take advantage of and own their healthcare and manage their healthcare in a way that is specific to them? And then every one of those markets has gently squeezed the problems out, creating new mechanisms, new structures, limited hierarchies, streamline everything. That's, and for many, some can see that, most can't, right? I wouldn't say we can't even, we're not even probably wise enough to see how all of this is going to shake out. But that's generally what's probably going to come down over the next few years, is that this is how other industries have ultimately figured this out. We should probably try that. And then this kind of squeezing exercise begins to happen. There's a great history for that. And there's a great backlog of startups that are still surviving to this day. 98% of startups, have, come out of the gate, flying, and then, the number kind of dwindles down in terms of those who actually make it. But many of those that really took advantage of that and that model, they're still out there today. And these are organizations that you can't live without. Companies like Zillow and others. I mean, they're a part of our lives now. So we hope to do the same here.
In the middle of that squeeze doesn't sound like a comfortable thing. So what's a provider system to do in all of this? This is we just talked about some of the enormous pressure they have with staffing issues, with using their capacity in an effective way, and then innovators or startups and capital flowing to areas that are trying to peel away profitable aspects of this.
Right.
In hearing your point, I mean, I wouldn't make the providers or the provider organizations the devil in this from that perspective. I think in many respects, the providing organizations are the solution and have been. They're just unfortunately working so hard, given the challenges of the day. Everything from seeing their day-to-day workload in terms of patients to now seeing COVID workload on top of it. They're just pressed. So to ask those folks that are like in the middle of this every day to be the key innovators would be a real challenge and a real stretch. But to provide them the assistance that these tools and techniques can, that starts to let their panel be more predictively cared for, where someone other than a physician, maybe a registered nurse or maybe someone else on the team, can be looking at that and in advance triaging many patients that they're having to physically see today off the physical see list and just take care of their needs other ways, either with email or by making a phone call or any number of other paths, and give capacity and time back to the providers and the providing organizations, and then allowing them to start to really embrace the changes that are coming their way through these tools. Their workflows have been extraordinarily challenging. EMRs have, increased physician burnout at a level I don't think we ever thought we'd see in our lifetime, and have just made their lives really difficult, right? So they're trying to fit into that round peg, square hole kind of thing. I think digital technologies, the things that you're describing, the things we've been talking about, offer great hope to providers and providing organizations for enhancing efficiencies, enhancing performance in the way that financial performance can improve, i.e. reducing some expenses, and then therefore using capacity more creatively to treat the most acute, and taking care of people who can proactively be, have the data looked at and analyzed, and then you can pretty much predict where their either health is going or where their conditions are going or headed, and head those off in advance when they can be treated much more effectively and easily before it becomes a major personal event from a health standpoint and potentially a hospitalization. So there's real opportunities in this. I mean, we saw the results when I was at Kaiser. And as much as our physicians and nurses were pressed to the limit, and I know they've been pressed there with COVID, the technologies have absolutely enhanced their ability to, everything from proactive office encounters, which was one thing that we implemented at Kaiser, to being proactive about health and improved health, and looking at all of the other reasons people's health suffers that go beyond the four walls of a medical clinic, to enable, the health system to really play a big role in keeping people healthier. Those things all, when you add them all up, change, the nature of primary care, and enable, advanced capabilities coming from primary care physicians and those that are involved in that industry, to do more with less and be more effective. And that's the way I'd kind of characterize the opportunity that, we're just talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sean, do you mind if I ask just one question off of that? Just if you don't mind. So I could not agree more with everything you just said, and the recent struggles are apparent. So kind of jumping on the how, because there's a lot of help out there, and one of the terms especially when you talk about it's this vertical is and always will be one of the most hands-on interactions you're ever going to have in your life. Hopefully not often in your life, but when it does happen, it is the most hands-on thing you will encounter. But what you speak of, I think, begins to introduce this term of automation. Is there an area within the supply chain or the kind of the administration processes, the high touch processes, that are more ripe for automation and the efficiencies that you're prescribing to than there are others? Is there one or two particular areas that are somewhat consistently from health system to health system to health system, like a repeat offender of just being overly manually strained, creating much of what you just described?
Sure. And many organizations are actually making these investments today. Everything about revenue cycle, from revenue realization, coding, all the way through to billing and collections, has been, we've done it the way we've done it, and that's the way we do it. And it's expensive to do, and it's difficult, and it's challenging, and it has a lot of errors and challenges embedded in it. But there's numerous technology companies that are out there that have really jumped all over that and offer the health system an opportunity to create more efficient revenue cycle activities. There are also companies that are, have jumped into the space to make coding this a more seamless event for physicians, a more seamless and accurate event, so that they're both managing, the appropriate level of coding along the lines of, how they treated the patient, but they're also doing it from the perspective of a government payer and assessing the codes that they put in to ensure that they're accurate and high, and that's exactly what they did, and what they're billing for is what they did, and they can, obviously support that. So there's a lot of work going on there, but I imagine there's a lot more to do. And then when you really think about, primary care, it's truly offloading, having primary care focused on the most acute circumstances, not the, hey, I want to just come in and see my physician today, or, because I want to go and have my normal annual physical. Annual physicals are done elsewhere. The ability to have, basically patients' health be monitored now in a much more real-time way, delivering on the promise of real-time healthcare, is more and more within our reach, and using the tools of the day. A lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have things like Apple Watches on their wrist now, and those watches provide a great deal of health insight. And just knowing someone's zip code, whether they live in a food desert or not. So you're just putting that kind of information together. I always thought when we were at Kaiser, we should give people, health monitors, and make them readily available to people who lived, who were, lower income and were challenged financially to support that, because the opportunity and the benefit to their health is so significant that when you think about the cost to the health system to take care of them, you could actually drive down the cost of each of those patients in a health system by materially, proactively improving their health. So it's really about putting all these pieces together in a way that, knits together a health service that makes everyone's lives better. And then when you think about the primary care side, it's really about enhancing primary care and physicians in particular, their lives, their day to day, and just offloading the work that's just stuff they shouldn't be wasting their time on.
So I'd love your. So there's also been a fair amount of debate about the role of big tech in healthcare, and the topic that we're engaging on now is inherently, in the realm of customer relationship management, or CRM. And both of you have a perspective, I'm sure, on what that means in healthcare and a clinical journey, and really driving towards the kinds of outcomes that I think we're all interested in. So, big tech, how is technology coming at this and maybe dealing with it in a constructive way?
The CRM space, when I hear people use that phrase associated with healthcare, what that has me think about is, the patient and the member should be in the middle, right? Putting the patient in the center of everything. And that is that's what consumerism means to me anyway. I should be able to get it the way I want it. I should be able to interact with healthcare system the way I'd like to. It should be convenient. It should be accessible. I should be able to talk to my doctor via video, or I should be able to phone them or go see them. All of those access points should be available and convenient. I should be able to get an appointment today or tomorrow if I need it. So all of that is really what I've just said is extraordinarily transformative across the health system, but it puts the patient in the middle. It puts them in the center. It makes them the purpose. It makes their needs the primary needs of the health system. And when you talk about CRM, it's I want to know my customer. I want to know how to serve them. I want to understand their needs. I want to understand when renewals are going to happen before they are needed, so I can ensure that renewals get taken care of. All the classic things that are embedded in CRM systems that essentially enhance the customer relationship and the insights that we have about the customer, are embedded in the systems I've been talking about in healthcare, where your patient, you put them in the center of all elements of care, and you're able to predictably assess their needs and address those needs before they occur. And that, to me, you wave the magic wand, and that's where healthcare needs to be. But I think those are the things digital transformation, digital health really aspire to.
Yeah, as one of our executives in our organization, Dr. Nace always says, nobody wants to be managed, right? And so these terms we're beginning to, conceptually, we're beginning to even surpass the term. The way you articulated it is perfect. But I, as kind of a marketing technologist by trade, I'm seeking what the evolution of that is. And so, because Sean brings up a good point, we have a responsibility to also create an archetype of what this should be. Therefore, we should be using linguistics that support that archetype of one system, 3 systems, 5 systems, whatever it is. I would resolve that most enterprise systems in North America, at least, will resolve to somewhere in the range of 4 to 5 super partners, super tech partners that will constitute the brunt of their success, right, over time. And that'll be due to a lot of M&A activity and other kind of relationships. But that being said, again, I look back in history, in tech digital history, and I look around the Y2K era, and that was that was coming out of the dawn of phase 1 of CRM, and that's when Salesforce was born, and other organizations were born out of that, and the cloud actually started to become a thing. Social media was becoming a little bit more normalized, but the term one-to-one was becoming predominant, and there was a consulting group called the Peppers and Rogers Group, and I think it's Don Peppers. He's still around today and doing God's good work. But back then, he was at the center of trying to get businesses to think about how you communicate your very difficult manufacturing, hotel, airline, highly complex industry to me, to Phil, to Sean, to Gary. Fast forward right now to Sean's comment. I don't even open a computer when I'm making an airline reservation. Like, I do everything on my phone. Like, it's rare that the computer even begins to have a sole purpose. So when you think about what CRM is now in that, CRM's evolvement into this kind of health one-to-one arena, again, keeps pressing to this same plateau and the same ceiling, which is the journey. CRM, I think we're right in the middle of it, which is why it's kind of hard to see. But CRM as a tool and as a mechanism that's transformed at least 30 times over the past 20 years, is now rationalizing itself to being the journey mapping source of truth, the patient mapping source of truth, the clinical mappings, in some cases, yes, source of truth, depending upon the system. And that is now, in a grand way, emboldening those that kind of have a desire, and most of them these are chief digital officers, chief communication officers, chief marketing officers who own the brand of the health system, and thereby have a responsibility to express the culture and the nature of the system as they go through their changes in the appropriate way. They should be the stewards of how that journey gets written, contextualized, humanized, in order to reach that plateau of consumerism. So it has an amazing slot. As with everything right now, I think it's a temporary slot. Tomorrow will be different. The day after that will be different. But as big tech sees it, I think they have a responsibility to see it in the eyes of trying to get to communicate one-to-one. And I think just by thinking like that takes the whole notion of what has now been a 10-year ramp up for CRM in health, in the provider space and in the payer space as well, for that accord, and completely changes the dynamics of how these tools can get utilized, mastered, and then last comment, ultimately integrated into the hardest systems. How does CRM really blend with an EMR? Nobody's figured that out yet. How does a CRM blend with a revenue cycle management system? Nobody's really figured that out yet, right? So the industry has to find better ways to articulate it to, again, kind of nudge these superstructures, technical and data structures, to find their path together. And that falls on us. That's we've got to be better at thinking of ways of doing that and partnering the right way, and looking at and at the same time understanding what the market dynamics are for that level of acceptance and when, because then the whole maturity thing comes into play, and that's a completely different story.
Yep. Listening to your comments, I mean, one of the things I'd add, and it's just a bit of another way to think about healthcare. Some years ago, when we were coming out with a lot of these capabilities, and the industry was kind of watching, one of the things I talked about was, the concierge care industry started to emerge, and for people who could pay the extra price and afford it, and subscribe to a concierge health system, they had all the things we're talking about today. They had the one-to-one care, they had the tech, they had the access, but you had to pay for it. It was a premium price. I think the things we're discussing today and the digital transformation that's in front of the healthcare industry normalizes, creates equality in healthcare, where effectively healthcare is one-to-one. It's really about me. When it's my health, it's only about me. I don't really care about you or anyone else. It's about me. Particularly if I have an issue and I'm concerned about something that's material or could be material. So having concierge care for the masses was something I described Kaiser evolving to when I was at Kaiser, because I believed fundamentally that the digital tools that were available and that were emerging offered the unique opportunity to do all of the things we did, which was everything in healthcare, on a one-to-one basis for every unique person we talked to. Now, you could say, well, Kaiser also stands for population care, and therefore they're looking at averages. Of course they are, because averages do give you insights that generally allow you to treat certain types of populations with predictive care. But it still is about one-to-one, and every person is unique, and sometimes the averages don't support their care or their care plan, because Something's different. There's an anomaly about that human. And that human needs a one-to-one care relationship. So concierge
I
care
think that's
for the masses, to me, is the future of healthcare. And it can be done affordably, and digital health and digital technologies will get us there.
I think that's a fantastic true north to work towards, that notion of health one-to-one, really that level of experience. I'm going to ask a speed round question of each of you and then one of both of you. All right. So, Bill, just in the context of all this, lesson learned. What's a lesson learned from you in applying digital into healthcare?
Well, lesson learned is that you can enhance the overall quality of care. At the same time, you're being concerned about, the physicians and the nurses, and they're delivering care, and they're living life with some balance. At the same time, you don't have to discount the need for putting the patient in the middle and letting the patient own their health and their care and the entirety of their healthcare journey with the digital technologies that are available that make that convenient for them. And by the way, if you and the catch here is, if you deliver great digital experiences for the patient, that patient's never leaving. They're a patient for life. They're a member for life, because you've met their expectations at the very least, if not exceeded them, in terms of that consumer journey we spoke of a little while ago.
Yep. So Gary, over to you now. So a watch out for, what would your view be on, as you embrace digital, what's something in your experience to watch out for?
I think it's a combination of watching out for, but mostly missing the call signs for what the end game is from I think kind of a physiological point of view. And that view is, no matter how hard you try, intentionally or unintentionally, probably more unintentionally, the consumer desire, want, need, acceptable benchmark levels always wins. You can't look back and ignore history, and I think that's a rally cry for providers that are going through the thick of it right now, for other systems that are trying to enter into the market, for disruptive entrants that are trying to change the market, in some cases not for better, in some cases for worse, and to keep your eye on the prize. That's what you have to watch out for. Never lose sight of the end game. The consumer you have to be fully and utterly, to the nth degree, patient and consumer centric, and then stay there, because you're going to have so many slings and arrows thrown at your way. It's easily to get distracted. I do it. It happens to me every day. And then I have to get back on my horse and be like, nope, that's the end game. So that's what to watch out for, and is to watch out for being diverted, distracted, off the course of getting to the consumer.
And then I said I'd have one for both of you. No regrets recommendation. So someone in a health system wrestling with this topic, no regrets. What do they do?
That's a great question. I think everyone will always look backwards and kind of armchair look at things through the lens of, we could have. But the reality is that no regrets is bringing, connecting the system and making sure all the health data is available when you treat every patient. A simple way to think of that is, it should be a right, not a privilege, to have all of your, medical information available every time you see a physician.
Yep.
Gary?
I'm going to be almost on the same line, but I would say the no regret moment for me is, if I happen to be looking back, I think we've come into a time, for the first time in a long time, where it's okay with no regret to kind of fight back on some of the structure that got us here. Certainly not a majority of it, but there's quite a bit of it, much of which Phil was kind of alluding to. I own my own health, not a provider, not that the system, quote unquote, doesn't own my health, doesn't own the proclivity of what happens to my health. And to be able to fight back against certain mechanisms that have been put in place over, in some case, decades, it's okay now to start pushing back a little bit, because I think we've crossed that chasm that is now speeding us towards, again, that end game. Those would be my kind of no regret look backs.
Well, thank you. And Bill, Gary, this is super conversation. We could go on. This is great dialogue for our listeners. So I'm just going to wrap us up with a few closing remarks. There will be show notes available for all of you and links to some additional resources and contact information. This is part of a series that we do. So this dialogue, many really good thoughts triggered here. We're going to stay on them. So stay tuned to the Innovaccer podcast. And for more about what we're doing in these areas, you can visit us at Innovaccer.com. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. Bill, Gary, awesome. Love catching up.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Innovation Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Innovaccer, the health cloud company. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to related resources and other information. And stay tuned to the Innovation Accelerator podcast for more programs about the healthcare IT topics you care about. Accelerate your transformation and build the future of health on the Innovaccer Health Cloud. For more information, please visit Innovaccer.com.